Saturday, March 22nd, 1969, New York City. Down the block, I'm looking through the wrought iron that separates the dead Sephardic Jews from us live numbers out here early Sabbath strolls. We're almost at 6th Avenue when I hear yelling, then laughing, then yelling, seemingly at the same moment. So nasal it makes Danny's whine sound like basso profundo at La Scala. Buddy, Boobala, where's your Steffi? Where's your Steffala? It's a little guy, squat, husky, shorter than Uncle Danny.
She doesn't shop, my uncle shouts back across.
You poor already?
She buys all day, she buys. I do all the shopping.
Slopping moppy. In the market for a hearing or a herring?
Can't afford earring, gotta buy a locks.
For Elliot?
How'd you know?
My uncle's crossing the street now, so I follow. Loose lips like small hips.
Whose hips?
I don't know. What do you think? Stephanie? Your Stephanie or my Stephanie?
Wanna come? Come.
Gardner gonna be there?
Of course not.
So why should I be there? Look, she's finally getting her rights. The little man's peering down at his wire terrier, who squats on the roots of the only tree planted this square-foot plot of dirt southeast corner of West 11th Street. Good girl, good girl, he's saying.
You want a part?
My uncle asks. Part schmart, he mutters.
Drop by, Day says. After 10, we might be off Broadway. Tell Stephanie.
No, you tell your Stephanie, the man says with a hearty cackle, or a cackle in his heart, depending your perspective. Jealous, my uncle says as we walk toward Tim. Who's his Stephanie?
My lover in the movies.
Yeah?
Mel thinks it's real.
What if it's real, ass?
The great what if is Stanislavski. Your aunt Shakespearean, she'll only murder me.
Hungry! Helen's looking down again from the 6th floor. Danny, I'm hungry, comes her shriek from the tower.
Helen, quiet, my uncle yells up to her. It's Shabbos, we're sorry.
Bring me lox, cheapskate.
You going to refrigerate? You'll be hungry all week.
So bring prosciutto.
Your husband, Hal, Danny pleads. He'll never forgive me.
He married me, you dummy. But we're already half a block past, in a split second walking straight into the grocery. Tiles and mirrors sparkling, clean as newly opened moe. All this rude, illogical shouting about marriage and Stephanie's gets me thinking, questions popping like disorderly champagne corks. So I asked Danny about the first guy, the little guy. Why he's so crazy funny? My uncle says he's always on because he's a writer, a comedy writer.
He's on, Danny explains. Everything with him is loaded.
He's funny looking, I say.
Harmless, but vain. It makes him paranoid. This thing about two Stephanies, he wants bed with my wife.
What? I ask.
Get in bed,
my uncle states flabbily.
With dear Aunt Stephanie. Danny turns, looks her straight in the eyes. Sorry, he says. I forgot. You're too young.
For what?
Understanding. Don't mean an insult. Wish I was young.
I suppose Danny really does wish he was young, but boy, he's a dummy. I get the whole thing. Temptations, infidelity, the jokes. The whole draggy kahuna, I get it. This is another reason I love my uncle. He's always telling me things I'm supposed to be too young for. And they're fun to hear about. Less than 24 hours, here we are again. Talking stuff over, standing in front of this effervescent clean counter. Eduardo's already finished slicing the lox and slides it across, packed up in waxed white deli paper. He looks me straight in the eye.
He's a big joker, he says.
Who, I ask.
Cream cheese? Eduardo adds, an upward reflected accent on the cheese. Plain and with chives, pint each. Danny closes, turning down the center aisle of store.
I follow. The jars, cans, and boxes are smaller than at the Giant in Washington. And they have funny-sounding names, shipped in from elusive, expensive countries. My uncle picks up Wilkin & Son's 3 Fruits Marmalade. When we get to the checkout, I pick up the jar and read the label. It's Tiptree medium cut lemon, orange, and grapefruit mixed to a thick, chewy gold. Dark as Coca-Cola, not translucent orange like the Smucker's dad buys. The candy rack at checkout has Hershey's milk chocolate and Hershey's almond bars. But instead of Milky Way and 3 Musketeers, here are miniatures of Callard and Bowser's toffee, plain chocolate and licorice, and hard butterscotch as well. There's halva on the rack, 5-colored rainbow jellies, and those British wafer-style mints rolled up tight in white paper with green lettering, foils circling both ends. Danny buys a box of Callard and Bowser's and gives it to me. The cashier rings everything. Before it totals, my uncle says, put it on our tab. Takes out a 5, then gives it to her before everything gets bagged. Danny even helps with the bagging. Thanks, Mr. Covener, she says. And we're out the door. We're off.
Let's walk up Fifth, my uncle says. Don't want to pass Women's House. You know the word tomorrow?
Yeah, what's with tomorrow?
Favorite curse of the beats. It's when we bring Helen food. Going to take her pastry. Gotta last all week.
I'm trying to chuckle, but help Danny feel better. But realize the little guy walking the poodle is funnier than I'll ever be. Why bother? When this black feeling comes over me, pure, unadulterated shame, the humiliation only 10-year-old boys feel, sitting back of our VW station wagon. Mom complaining, Danny's married a high-class call girl. And Dad says, yeah, dances for New York City Ballet, if not high. At least it's upper middle class.
Her family, they barely said a word to us, Mom adds.
Well, they're Irish. They're Catholic. They're Irish Catholics. It's quiet for a minute. My mom and Dad considering the full significance of his particular derivation. Her father, Dad says, just got a degree in library science. He's going to work at Butler Library or Columbia. Didn't I work at Butler Library, Columbia? I'm either getting ahead or just really getting behind my story. Either way, the difference is 8 years and dead serious. It's utter, complete loss, I imagine.
Can you imagine, Mom says. Age 48, Fred Guinan gets his MLS. 25 years, Beckdinger Mills. He goes back to school to become a librarian.
Must be money in the family, Dad says.
You think?
The house.
Right, Mom says.
I'm trying to sleep. Joshua curled up next to me in the back seat. 50-plus bottles Moët, 8 tiers of lemon vanilla cake, and the dreamy yellow convertible Danny and new Aunt Steffi jump into her 530, driving into the Chappaqua dusk like lusty, heartsick teenagers. My parents say such things.
Here, take Subway.
My uncle hands over the leash. Half a year after the wedding, I'm walking up with my Uncle Danny like I'm his eldest son. There's a Catholic church to our left. I'm wanting to go in and ask God for a little forgiveness. But we turn left down West 11th. Before we know it, we're home. I unleash Subway as Danny takes the goodies into the kitchen. Stephanie's unloading cups and plates from the dishwasher.
I'm going to take a shout, my uncle says, before they get here.
Help me set out dishes, says my aunt. She must be talking to me because my uncle keeps walking to the bedroom. Great, I can help. I bring out a stack of 9 plates in 2 trips, carry as many cups for coffee in 3. Steffi sets glasses on the counter for the orange juice. Helping Mom felt like a chore this past year. Always had a book to read, a paper to write. It's with penance and enormous relief that I now assist my aunt. How will I repay her little kindnesses to me? Will I ever make up for irrevocable mistrust? My parents' envious claim of superiority? Aunt Stephanie lays out lox, dumps cream cheese in 2 bowls, unscrews the tightest cap from the Vulcans and Sons 3 fruits marmalade. I'm wondering if there might be some Moët as well when suddenly the front door opens. In walks Marie, the nanny, holding Katie in her arms. Haven't noticed they were gone. Errant morning minutes passing so swift that now that they're here, there's less silence. It's even a little noisy. So I give Katie a pat on the head and say hi. The front bell rings, so Marie answers it, baby in arms. Hello, baby. Tense eyes hang sloppy in a cheerful mugger face. Elliot's here. Tell your mama Elliot's here. My aunt saunters out from the kitchen, platter of lox in hand.
Elliot, announces she, displaying slim hips, delicate waist, and sandy long limbs balancing the platter of thin sliced fish. All for you, Elliot.
Oh, Steffi, he says. You shouldn't, you can't. Then, booming from back comes a basso profundo that can only be my uncle. Elliot! Elliot! The same. Elliot tones. I'm the same. Always the same.
You're you're inimitable, stated cheerily as Danny waltzes into the room. Irreplaceable.
Dave Burns wasn't available? Elliot asks. Gets out 11 p.m. Got the price. We're too early for him, Stephanie says.
Come June, he gets the toady.
Yeah, it's my uncle.
No one knows for shit in the movies. Who's going to produce David Burns?
Getting into movies? Elliot's totally befuddled.
That's why we're reading. 9 in the morning, I go to the deli with my Washington nephew for this.
Washington nephew? Elliot looks at me finally. I'm studying him all this time. Now he notices me? Block, Stephanie says, to no one in particular. She's still holding the platter, blocking the hallway with her disappearing waist. All right already, says Elliot, sitting finally. Toast my bagel.
Thank you very much. So balloon. Oh, God. Uh,
We go into this questions and please, right?
yeah, yeah. So I just wanted to make sure we'll definitely have time. I want to make sure we get to everybody's questions. For those of you, I know some people in the audience have had a chance to read this wonderful book, and others of you are going to be buying it and reading it, I'm sure, soon. And if you have not yet read it, you're absolutely in for a treat. You saw a sample of it here, but this just really scratches the surface of one of the most honest and um, passionate reflections on life that I've had the privilege to read. And anyone I've spoken to who has read this book has echoed those sentiments. And so I want to start, Cal, by discussing the idea of the narrative structure and how you tackle putting such a book together. Obviously, this comes from real life experiences, and you masterfully created fiction from those experiences. And specifically, I want if you could touch on a little bit about the way it was actually in the sample that we read. You see where Sam jumps kind of from his present into the past as he reflects on an experience with his parents. And throughout the book, I was fascinated by that approach to the narrative to tell those backstories that inform where Sam is in his present in the 1970s in a way that was not the typical abrupt one chapter ends and another begins and we're in a different time period, but this seamless stream of consciousness that really reflects the way many of us actually think. So I'll turn it over to you, and if you could just sure talk about that.
Well, um, I grew up reading Faulkner, Joyce, a lot of modernist writers who um, let their subconscious take over when they sat down to write. And um, it Salbello does that. And so it kind of is a natural impulse for me to um, set up a structure at the outset and then um, just let whatever comes to my mind um, end up on the page. What I always do is I ask the hardest question I can come up with. Um, I accept it, whatever the given circumstances are. And in this case, the inciting action is I wake up on the floor of the lecture hall that in um, in the School of International Affairs at Columbia University, and it's dark, and I don't quite know how I got there, and I hear a truck passing, and I see the lights going across the wall, and and uh, and I remember I dropped the paper off dropped my midterm off, and then I remember of cutting my foot when I was 5, bashing my head when I was 10. And it starts to hurt. I get up. I have to leave School de National Affairs, cross Amsterdam, go to the quad, go to my joint. I get in the elevator. I see words scrawled in the metal panel where the buttons are, and I see they're etched in the metal and they're scrawled on the plastic wall. And I read the words and I I figure out they're all about me. I interpret them as being all about me. I walk down the hall. There's an open door. It's the come one of the party loos, right? You get off the elevator, and they're kind of rooting and laughing, inviting me in. And I imagine they putting me down and saying terrible things about me. And halfway down the hall, and I hear the voice at this junior English major who lives on the other side of her fall, and he's calling me a she and putting me down. And he actually, I had met a girl my first month there, and it's now February, and I, I she stopped seeing me like uh, near the end of October and started going out with him, but she isn't going out with him. But I hear his voice. I turn around, there's no one there, just noise. So I realize all this seems like 100% reality to me, like it's really happening. I believe it 100%. But something tells me this is not. This is that I'm going crazy. Part of me realizes I'm going crazy. So the question I have is, how do I get well? And that is the hard question that drove the entire book, sentence by sentence, page by page, chapter by chapter. I was seeking to answer that question. And you find that if you have one intention, it's like a super objective that anchors you, and it provides a very durable foundation for this great structure that's a novel. And you don't want your structure to be ordered and uh, predicted. You don't want any of it to be. I mean, I never can understand how people plot out books. I think you just start with a question, and you start with your inciting, and I mean inciting as you're starting a kind of a riot of thought inside your mind, and you're also trying to look for insight for what you really believe and think about certain events. And that's the process of writing, is letting the events come naturally, and then whatever thoughts and feelings you have, putting them down on paper. So I ended up asking that question, and he ends up trying to find the answer to that question for the first 171 pages and for 36 straight hours. Um, and you know, if you ever can answer that hard question as a writer, you should go back and reframe it, because you don't want to answer that question. You want that question left open ended, so every reader can come to their own feelings, their own thoughts, their own intellectual process of solving, of trying to find their own answer to that question. And this question, you find yourself using your mind, going crazy. How do you get well? God, what a difficult question. I mean, with any illness, it's not an easy process. So um, I greatly appreciate your response to the book, because I took that. I I I committed to sitting down every day and taking time with every thought and every action, and it requires a reader to step inside the character's shoes and take that time and seek to find subtext and meanings and associations and connections between characters and between events that we might not immediately go to, but that that come to us unbidden. And then I always find the most wise things come to us, just they like come to us. We don't we never would have imagined until that day. So I think
There's clearly a lot of emotional components to it that you instilled in the novel, but I want to focus a little bit on another thing that sort of jumped out at me.
yeah,
I was born right after most of these events kind of wrapped up, and as a reader, I felt you went to such great lengths to bring the time and place of the story to life. So whether it's New York or DC, the 1970s, the 1960s, it felt it felt so real to me that you weren't just telling a story, but you were capturing the spirit of the place and time. I was curious how important was that to you, to and what research went into that, how much it was just your own recollections.
sure. Um, well, In essence, it was just the process, the writing process, because um, I had um, every event, every person in the book, every event happened, every person is real. I dramatized uh, by intention because I believe that in fiction you can get at the real truth in events. You can get at the subtext. You get it. You interpret why things happen. You can present your own feelings, your point of view as to why people behave the way they do, and what things, what significance certain events have, and and you can you can explore problems in fiction that if you're writing a memoir and nonfiction, I feel an obligation as a writer to be completely accurate to to the truth as best I know how. So there was a memoir, I could have to write every single fact exactly as it happened, and I might miss some of the. So this gave me poetic license to just dramatize real events. So, for instance, this walk through New York City, that walk actually happened. The woman who shouts down at us, um, I was 9 years old and I heard this woman shouting from a barred window 6 flights up. It was woman's house of detention. My uncle had a friend who he knew, who he used to talk to. He brought her things. When you read the book, he he brought her food. They were friends. He kind of had it. They had a friendship, and uh, so these are all things that I remembered. But I allowed myself to just create a scene and describe it and fill in the details. So I had the ideas in my mind. I have to say I did. Richard Cox is going to be reading with me at Book Soup in Los Angeles. He lived in Greenwich Village. He was an actor. He knows some of the characters in this. He remembers all this. He said, "God, you got it. I Woman's House at a Tech." So I've had people, and Elliot Gould was one of my early readers. He read the book twice. He thought he learned a lot about the character and the characters in it who he was close friends with, but he didn't know as well as I did, say. So um that I had people read it to to get some sense of it being um of the verisimilitude of what I remembered. But Uh, that was after I had written. So I worked on my own. I very much believe writing should come from your heart and your mind. It's really good because it's such a individual, solitary process. Your imagination is your own. Um, it's so that's part of its strengths. It's your own. Um, but the other thing is that I my mother's uh, was, and you know about Jewish families. So my mother was the daughter, and you read the book. There's a lot about her family, and my father's family, but more about my mother's family. But her parents fled the pogroms in Kiev. They spoke Yiddish all day life. She was the first in her family, or maybe the only one in her family, to go to UCLA. She took an art history class there. To this day, she speaks with, like, I realized that there was this world of learning and books, and um, this was in the 50s, and she grew up in a largely the families were all uh, first generation immigrants from Ukraine, most of them, like your family. Yes, and Fred's written a book about the Holocaust, which is maybe we talk a little bit more about later. But um, so she kept every single paper of mine from school. She also had an immense. I have a friend here from Sidwell Friends School, which is very close to my heart because I can tell you, um, they valued learning and books and keeping in touch with things. So things were archived and kept. So my mother kept all my papers, and I had all my papers from Columbia University in the spring. Um, and the irony of some of this is before all this happened, the paper that I turned in, I got an A on the midterm. I was taking 4 junior level courses, and I still have all my notebooks filled with notes. So my mother kept all those. So I went through, actually was able to go back and read through all my papers and notes, and from years before, and I had letters from years before, and photographs, and I read all of Rick Perlstein's books about. He's written 3 or 4 wonderful books about politics from the 40s, 50s, 60s. So I just read about the political life in the country. They're about 1,000 page each. I'm not sure what he's working on now. His last book was about the Reagan era, but he wrote a book about the 40s and the 50s. He wrote all about the Red Scare, and his work on the 60s and Richard Nixon is fantastic. So I read all those books because this, of course, much of it took place in 1968, 69. And and I'm a bookworm. So I grew up reading some of the 60s writers, but I ended up as an adult reading just about everybody and everything. So I read all of Saul Bellow, I read all of Philip Roth, some of which I couldn't read, so I couldn't read all of it, but entirely love Philip Roth. Um, uh, E.L. Doctorow, and I have to tell you, that literature is kind of social history in and of itself. You get a real sense of the way people connected and interrelated. And there was no internet, there was no computers, there was no everyone read newspapers, and families would come hell or high water, they'd have dinner together at 6 or 6:30, and all kinds of upsetting things would happen, and bad words would get exchanged, but at least they were there together connecting, right? So I kind of immersed myself in that uh, world, and I had to eat. It was fairly easy to do. Um, I sometimes think I still immerse myself in that world, because the music. I mean, I still love Little Feat, Jackson Brown, early Neil Young. That's what I listen to. Jimi Hendrix. So I don't know, even that, because it brought back music is a great thing to bring back memories. Uh, so
Um, Thank you. So
yeah,
it, it's clearly a what do they call it, a coming of age book.
yeah,
And you touched on some elements of that in the time period, and you mentioned that you were a kid that observing these things.
sure.
How much you mentioned a lot about your family, and how much did your family factor into it? Is there in the story of Sam's journey, and how he sort of the challenges and struggles that he went through, and the hope and optimism that's somehow never really leaves throughout the story.
Thank you for seeing ya. And um, there's an inherent contradiction i- within my family, and maybe within a lot of families. And that's that. Um, on the one hand, um, first of all, what happened to me happened like it just overtook me like it was an accident, but it didn't happen by accidents. There were a lot of real life events that led up to it. And what the section we've just read, um, you get a little bit of a hint of some of the um, kind of mixed messages and competitiveness and rivalry and stuff within my family. I was the oldest son, and but the specific thing that happened, and this has to do with coming of age, because in my view, the real thing in coming of age is having a sense of um, intimacy with other people, being able to be intimate with other people. And intimacy is a word that kind of is has people have perhaps defined it in a way that I don't, because I don't think intimacy has very much at all to do with sex. Intimacy is about being emotionally open and available with other people, and feeling they have your back and you can talk to them about things, and they're gonna listen to you, help you figure things out. I mean, people who want to avoid intimacy will go to sex, or people who want to control other people are more interested in the power dynamic. Sex takes the place of intimacy. So people have kind of, in many cases, I think we kind of lost touch with that, uh, having that kind of awareness of very close, trusting friendships and relationships. So my father, really first, was first, his father was the breadwinner at age 8, and he was kind of driven by his father. And um, but he got a PhD in economics and moved to Washington, had a good job. And within 2 years, my uncle had been in New York for 10 years trying to make ends meet, and became a very, very kind of unique, one of a kind force of nature up was they came, got into movies. And then for him, it seemed overnight it wasn't. But we didn't read a scene that we read in another reading. My grandfather came to visit and told my father he was working for peanuts. He was a loser. So here, the oldest son was raised to think he was the shining, or he was the firstborn son, and all of a sudden he's a loser. So and I was 10, and all through my adolescence, my father was pressure and under the gun and very critical, and we fought all the time, day and night. I had no one I could talk to. I felt pressure to get A's in school. Uh, Um, I ended up spending most of my time in a library, which was I was happy there, but my parents wouldn't allow me my father, too much social life, you don't have time for your studies. So I couldn't wait to go to college. Applied to University of Chicago, Columbia, got in early admission. You went to Columbia when I was 17, and uh, still didn't have the experience of having a, a, a close friend. And yet I had observed and had some pretty hard things happen in my life already. And then there was some uncertainty. I had at Columbia, was living on an all male floor. Kids weren't nice then. I mean, I look at what's happening in colleges now. I think it's got nothing to do with, uh, I mean, let's put foreign policy and Israel and all that aside. Some colleges have never been such friendly places for anybody. It wasn't friendly to me. So that's how all this happened. And the thing about the intimacy is that was missing. I didn't have it with friends. And then I looked to my uncle for that. He had his own life. And I kind of was a little uncomfortable as right about Manal. I didn't want to be kind of I wanted to be independent of everyone. I wanted to be on my own. So that uh, is a, is a, um, there are a lot of scenes and relationships where you see characters very actively striving for intimacy, and maybe sometimes partially succeeding, but oftentimes failing. But I didn't have the ego strength to live in in uncertainty, and that you'll see. And that was part of what happened. I couldn't cope with uncertainty with a woman I was dating. So so that's a big part of the book, because um, I think with that we can get into the final third of the book. The second half of the book was actually when I had a like a 2 week involvement with a high school classmate, Um, who I'm actually going to see in a couple weeks. Uh, I think she thought what I wrote was okay. Um, but that showed me enough that I was able to relax and realize I was actually going crazy and that I needed help. And it wasn't until I was had that time with her, alone with her, about 2 weeks that I could let my defenses down. And yeah, and so the final third of the book takes place um, at a hospital called Chestnut Lodge, a place I am still very grateful for. It was an extraordinary hospital, um, started by the first gay psychoanalyst, perhaps in history, Jerry Stack Sullivan, who was a very he was started to head the hospital in the 30s. He kept 1.5 million young American men out of the service because he knew they'd be harassed and abused. Um, but the main thing, one of his main theoretical contributions was he completely split away from Freud, who thought that people were formed in their first 4 years of life. He said, the first 6 years, people are formed. You have a genetic inheritance, and then you're formed. But whatever you whatever you are is good. He didn't differentiate or try to categorize. He included everybody. Um, he said where people end up with psychiatric illnesses is through repression, repression, or s- or or denying whatever their natural impulse or uh, feelings are. So, and of course, this excludes. He viewed war as the ultimate mental illness, and aggression is an illness, and uh, uh, worse than an illness. Aggression, he would categorize as a character disorder. So, and this is something people don't do so much now, but um, when you transgress against another person, that's a moral issue. That's a crime. That's really not what one described as a psychiatric illness. So the impulses here referring to are just natural, giving, loving impulses that men feel for women, for men might feel for other men, you know, and he said they're all healthy, they're all good. He said also people have a natural impulse to create, to contribute to a community, to be part of a community, and to repair. That's what people lose sight of. He believed that anyone with a severe psychiatric illness could repair 100%. So they had 30 to 40% remission at Chestnut Lodge. Frieda von Reichmann, who was a psychoanalyst from Europe, she had her own hospital in Europe. She was from an Orthodox Jewish background. She fled the Holocaust. She was perhaps the most internationally known psychoanalyst there because she worked with these severely disassociated patients. And I knew some. I knew one on my floor, a young woman who was catatonic for the first year and a half that I was there. Didn't move, didn't speak. The doctor would come to her room and just sit with her for weeks. And gradually she knew someone was sitting there and taking the time with her, and she started to get gradually, step by step, back in touch with reality. And within a couple years, she was well enough. She went back home. And about 8 years after that, I got a wedding announcement in the mail. So I so I feel such gratitude for having known all these as well, because they were all really sweet people. Um, and I met a lot of people like this at a clinic in Washington Heights, Dominican Americans, Spanish speaking. I speak fluent Spanish. I led a storytelling group, and did some therapy. And they used to all tell us, tell their stories, and everyone had a lot to say and a lot to write. Some of the women, and then there were some men who wrote in Spanish, some in English. Um, and of course, their stories were filled with clues into why they were having severe depression or mania or delusions. There were real reasons why. Now, state hospitals in this country used to practice this kind of medicine. I saw there was a state hospital in New York in Queens. They had a huge art studio there, and I saw an exhibit at the Queens Museum of Art 15 years ago. Um, it might maybe 14 years ago. I think I took our son Harry to it when he was 2. It was there must have been 200, 250 wonderful works of art on display. They're created by people who were patients at this hospital, and they had an art studio. And they did therapy, and they got back to, and many went back to live in New York City and worked as professional artists. So all this is very accessible, but we've lost. I think what happened is the government found ways to deny funding to state hospitals, and the medicine became profit directive, and people have lost the actual awareness of this kind of medicine. But I was, I can say it took me when I was at Chestnut Lodge. I spent 2 years reading and working with a therapist and talking and trying to get to rewire my mind and connect it with my feelings. I spent 2 years earning the privilege to leave a locked ward to eat in the dining hall. And I'm still proud for that. So it it takes a certain humility to confront a problem and deal with it. And it wasn't just my humility. I can tell you my family was able to take a deep breath and say, what did we do? And they were able to admit a lot of mistakes they'd made, a lot of things they'd done wrong. I was the oldest son, and a lot of bad stuff happens. It's some of it, a lot of it's in the book. It wasn't terrible, but it was enough. So, but they had the humility to say that and say, well, but we can, you can have a life in it, and we'll help you out. Now, within 4 years, I was out of the hospital. I was back at college, and I was living in a group home, and we had no heat right near Catholic University. And I was there for about 2 months with 3 other Catholic U students. And did fine in my classes, and we were freezing every day. We finally all had to move, but I knew I was in remission, and I healed. And I have to say, I'm grateful for every day of my life since. I'm even grateful. I'm grateful for the year at Columbia. But also don't think there's anything special about my experience. It's why I titled the book "Easy to Slip." Could have happened to anybody, and anyone can recover from. I'm not going to say, I think the diagnoses are inaccurate, but my case was the same as Frieda from Reichman had a patient. Joanne Reberg wrote a book called "It Never Promised You a Rose Garden," and she wrote about she lived in a dream world. So I actually saw things, I heard things, and I constructed a lot of different dream worlds that I was kind of existing in that I thought were the only reality. So that was my situation, but I found my way out of it. Might be usable.
If there's any questions, we should do that now. Just no, one off. And they should talk.
Anybody have any questions? No.
I have a comment
Oh, sure.
to mix. Yeah. You mentioned in the first comment that you made that you mentioned Saul Bellow and Joyce. And it was really funny because as I read your book, I said to myself, and then I know you mentioned it in the book, but I said to myself, the prose here remind me of some sort of synthesis of Joyce, but a lot more readable.
Yeah.
And Bella.
Oh, thanks.
And let me tell you, I don't finish a lot of books that I pick up.
Yeah.
But I picked it up and I read it every day for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And it took me
Nice. Thanks.
back to places that I was in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
And it was joy.
Thank you, John. Yeah.
You got something, man? And you had a question? Yeah, say something. Oh, sure. Kind of want to lighten the mood a little bit. Oh, that was super deep, bro. That was super deep. So I downloaded the book yesterday. Sure. I read it completely. And a couple things really touched me. The first part, and you talk about it, about the way you use music. But I want to read this section. This was on page 30. It's just a paragraph. And this is one example. And then you do it again when Sam is with Michelle with a Joni Mitchell song, when she's like worrying if love started too fast. But this is the part that I think is literally the best thing I've ever read. Oh, excellent. Al Green's greatest hits, Bob Dylan's Nashville Skyline, playing all the time in the car. He's talking about his uncle. Yeah. Not really rock, but they explain what people were quiet about, what they might be up to around the set, how they were tired of being alone, not getting next to you, for how you can mend a broken heart. Let's stay together, take you to the river, and wash you down, so you can lay across a big grass bed and not even get those white sheets dirty wash. Yeah, timed out. Don't worry. Now that'll amazing her. I mean, you did.
It was just a 10-year-old trying to understand what the music was about when I was trying to intuit what the relationships were about. And he was seeing these hints and bits of flirtation that didn't quite make sense. And then he would see his uncle and aunt having, these kind of veiled, sad communications at home. And, so he's trying to understand all of it. And the music, right, starts to, that beautiful. Yeah.
Usually I don't say anything, but I have to say what the gentleman said about Joyce.
Yeah.
It just that it reminds there's a scene when you talk about, things that you see that on the wall or writings that you think that it's up to and stuff. Did you think of a portrait of the artist as a young man? I don't know if people read it here and if they can remember the time when portrait of the artist as a young man. James Joyce, the author, talks about how a bad word is going to come out of there and just like hit him. The bad word is coming alive. And there's something to be said that reminds me of your work. So I agree. Thanks, a gentleman who mentioned Jonas, the portrait of the artist. It's probably intrinsic to the problem the character is trying to solve too, because the reason people hear things and see things and create, a dream world is because they cannot narratize for themselves their own real world. They can't think in terms of cause and effect. It's too painful. And so the whole dynamic is he's living on this floor and it's filled with threat
from all sides. And some of it's real, some of it isn't. But if some of it's real, he's trying to kind of figure out and understand it. And he's thinking, well, why are these people so, why are they, picking on me, and why are they angry at me? And he thinks it's because the girl I dated, this guy picked up, and maybe she broke up with him too, and now he's angry at me. I don't know. So he fills that in as the reason. That makes him more angry, all right? But Sam and many of us, we can't live with anger so easily. We can't. We don't feel we're entitled to anger that easily. So the process that happens is we project it outside. So this process of projecting one's inner feelings and thoughts onto other people, once it starts, it's like a cycle. It starts, and then you project it out, and then it comes back at you, and it's the same anger and threat, persecution, and then you project it outward again, and it's just it builds, and builds, and there's no end to it. So that drives him off the dorm, out to the street, walking through New York for 36 hours, and he's looking for detail and meaning in the city. And thank God he has his memories, because he goes back to the memories when he sees the chock full of nuts. Yeah, it's like the beauty in the ordinary, and that vision of the fluorescent light as they're setting up the coffee shop before dawn on Broadway, standing on the cobblestones under the Columbia Gate, 116th Street. That allows him to begin to go back to his earliest memories in Baltimore. And then the memories are told kind of sequentially, and that is able to that connects him to um, a lot of good things that happened, desires he had, and his so it gives him something to hope for and to work towards. He wants to recover that world again in the present. Right. Like this ain't a ball game with his dad. Yeah. And he just keeps moving. That keeps him moving forward. So the thing is, narrative is something that's a very helpful thing. And I mean detailed, deep narrative like we find in really good fiction or in really true detailed history. Narrative is what keeps us whole. It keeps us connected. Narrative is what we have in common. And when a culture starts to lose narrative, or when a person loses their internal narrative, that's where we end up with problems. So an individual can lose their internal narrative, and they'll hear things and see things, and they can work it out for themselves. But God, let's save our culture and have shared narratives, like these writers have been talking about. We have a tradition of shared narrative in our country, and from all different backgrounds. James Baldwin, Darcy Barkes, Saul Bellow. I mean, from all backgrounds and different languages, who yet have become distinctly American. Garcia Marquez, he's kind of like an American author now. I mean, Bill Clinton made him, So, but also we remember taking all the Latin America, the boom literature. We read all that to Carlos Fuentes, and so there's all kinds of yeah. So to have that shared narrative, that keeps us. That's what keeps us whole. And so
There's an there.